Welcome to our next Wandering Walks of Wonder adventure. Today we're headed to the small Missouri town of Marceline. Have you ever wondered where Walt Disney lived as a child? Or asked yourself, where did Main Street U.S.A. come from in Disneyland? Well, you'll get those answers here today on this video on this tour of Marceline, Missouri. Walt Disney spent his most formative years in this magical Midwestern city. Walt Disney first came to Marceline when he was 4 years old, when his father, Elias Disney, a failed but ever-hopeful farmer, businessman, and carpenter, decided to move his family to try another go of farming here in 1906. Walt would often say his time spent here in Marceline were the most formative of his life. To commemorate the 100th anniversary of Walt Disney's birth, the city of Marceline planned to host a 3-day celebration. That celebration was scheduled for September 21st, 22nd, and 23rd of the year 2001. However, just 2 weeks before the celebration was scheduled to take place, the 9/11 attacks occurred in New York, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. While the event planners strongly considered canceling the event, they received a clear message from all over the world. Don't let them stop you. The celebration took place, and during this 3-day period, what was called then and today a barn raising built this barn that we see here. This barn was modeled after one that Walt Disney really liked. By his own account, Walt's happiest childhood memories were of his family's farm here in Marceline. Walt recalled that on a sunny Missouri day, he announced to the neighboring children that the Disney Family Circus would be performing later that day inside the Disney barn. Admission would be 10 cents. His circus animals were dogs, cats, and a pig dressed in baby clothes. In hindsight, Walt admitted that you can't train a cat to do much. His audience was unimpressed. Flora, Walt's mother, made him return the admission he had charged. Walt recalls learning a valuable lesson. Give the audience more entertainment value than they expect, and they will be happy customers. That Marceline lesson served him well. Welcome to downtown Marceline, and our first stop here in the downtown area, the Santa Fe Depot. Prior to the brick building you now see, there was a large wooden depot that stood here on the exact same foundation footprint. It had been built at the time of the city's founding in 1888. It was this depot building that greeted the Disneys when they moved from Chicago to here in April of 1906. When the Disney family moved on to Kansas City in 1911, the wooden Santa Fe Depot was still here to say goodbye to them. But the building soon was torn down, and in April of 1913, the new Santa Fe passenger station and office building was dedicated. By this time, Marceline was only in its 25th year, and it now had a train station that was one of the best in the United States. This building has over 107 windows, and at that time had over 200 electric lights. It was a citywide celebration, and every building in town was decorated for the event when the building opened. A Walt Disney tribute in Marceline was considered as far back as 1956. Immediately following Walt and Roy's visit that year, the Marceline City Council voted to pursue the possibility of a Walt Disney Museum here in Marceline. Though he accepted many awards for his work, Walt wasn't interested in being honored with the museum during his lifetime. It would be more than 4 decades later that the Walt Disney Hometown Museum was established. As the last sibling, Walt's sister, Flora Disney Beecher, became the keeper of the family's mementos. It was Ruth's intention that people better understand who her brother was through examination of his letters, family photographs, and personal items. It was also her desire that this collection be displayed in Marceline, the one location that meant so much to Walt. Over 3,000 items were donated by Ruth when she passed away in 1995, and this became the foundation of the Walt Disney Hometown Museum. In 2001, the museum was originally intended to be a 3-day experience that would commemorate Walt's 100th birthday. And once the birthday festivities ended, so would the museum. However, the public loved the museum so much that the museum remained open and it evolved into the fantastic museum that it is today. This is a Model SD40 6-axle diesel-electric locomotive engine built by the General Motors Electric Motor Division in 1966. Walt was a great lover of trains, and it's appropriate that this train is located not only next to the Santa Fe Depot, but right here next to the Walt Disney Boyhood Home Museum. One of the early rides that Walt Disney had in Disneyland was the Midget Autopia, which was a race car type track driven by really small kids. There's still one today in Disneyland, Disney World, and many of the area parks, but this one was built specifically for kids. But unfortunately, due to the lack of people really enjoying the ride, it was closed in 1966. Walt Disney gave the ride to his boyhood hometown, Marceline, Missouri. The Midget Autopia operated on a new track at Walt Disney's Municipal Park, and eventually the little cars that were built in 1957 began to wear out. In fact, if you go inside the museum, you can see an original little car that was built. Parts were no longer closed, and that version of the ride just south of town here closed in 1977. And here you can see what some of the cars used to look like in the track. A couple years ago, efforts were made to restore the track here closer to the Disney Hometown Museum. And today, kids can still ride and walk along the track. And imagine what it was like in Disneyland almost 60 years ago. We're now coming to Ripley Square, Marceline's City Park. Over 100 years ago, it was described as one of the most beautiful miniature parks on the Santa Fe Railroad system. But it wasn't always so. In 1898, this area was comprised of unsightly shacks and dumps right in the heart of the city. It didn't offer a great first impression on visitors who were just passing through. The newly elected mayor of Marceline, Walter Cash, early on began a campaign for civic improvement. Bonds in the sum of $5,000 were approved. Part of the park property was purchased by the city and cleaned up. The president of the Santa Fe Railroad, E.P. Ripley, donated 10 lots owned by the railroad on which stood a large grain elevator. The grain elevator was removed, fountains were installed, and a beautiful lake was constructed. It was named Ripley Square, and by 1902 it had become a showcase for the city of Marceline. The bridge we walked across was built in 2015, and it is designed to be reminiscent of the iron fence surrounding the Disneyland train station. Speaking of trains, before railroads existed, travel across this land hadn't changed much for 1,000 years, but railroads changed all that. This oil steam locomotive was built in 1911 at the Alco's Works in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was known as the Consolidation Type 280, and after 1875 it was the most popular railroad engine type in the country for over 50 years. It weighs over 1,000 tons, and the oil tender behind weighs about the same. This locomotive had a top speed of 40 miles per hour, but not so fast these days, but fast enough in the late 1800s. This steam engine was given to the city of Marceline and placed in Ripley Square in 1955. Walt Disney waved to the crowd in Ripley Square when he visited the town on July 4th, 1956 with his brother Roy. It was the day of the Walt Disney swimming pool dedication, and Walt had come to town. The engine had just been lettered the Santa Fe and Disneyland Railroad prior to Walt's visit in tribute to his recently opened Disneyland. The first post office established in Marceline was in 1888. It was originally located where the Gucker Oil Company building now stands and was relocated several times before settling here in 1938. After Walt Disney's death on December 15, 1966, the citizens of Marceline lobbied the United States Postal Department to issue a commemorative stamp in his honor. 2 years later, the Postal Department agreed to issue the stamp. Cities that had ties to Walt Disney vied to be the special location for the first day of issue of the stamp. In addition to Marceline, those places in Burbank, California, Kansas City, Anaheim, and Chicago were also considered. But Marceline was chosen as Walt's hometown for the issue of the commemorative stamp. That issue date took place on September the 11th, 1968. It was the biggest event in Marceline's history up to that time. In attendance were Disney family members, politicians, foreign representatives from over 71 countries, and various movie stars. The crowd was said to have been between 8,000 and 10,000 people. Ahead of us is the historic Allen Hotel. In years gone by, as it now is, the importance of a city is largely judged by its hotel facilities. In the early 1900s, the Allen Hotel was the leading hotel in Marceline. It was built in 1906, and it was brand new when the Disneys arrived in Marceline. The Allen Hotel had all the modern conveniences: hot and cold running water, steam heating, and electric lights. The hotel was known for its quick service, elegant cooking, and fine furnishings. It was located within an easy walk or horse cart ride from the railroad station. Roy Disney later recalled the entire family having a meal in the dining room one time. Roy couldn't remember what he had to eat, but he did remember that his little sister Ruth spilled a plate of food that their father paid for in real cash. In 1913, the hotel charged $2 per day, including meals, and could accommodate up to 100 guests. After a long history dating back to the early days of the city, the Allen Hotel closed its doors in 1968. We're now coming up to the historic Uptown Theater. This theater opened in June of 1930, and at the time it was called the Dickinson Theater. It was specifically planned and built for talking movies and had the latest sound technology available. The interior was designed to be visually elegant and have excellent acoustics. Newspaper accounts wrote about the fine new cooling system installed at the Dickinson and that huge fans made it plenty cool for all theater goers. It was called one of the best theaters in Missouri. Walt and Roy Disney held the Midwest premiere of their feature film, The Great Locomotive Chase, in the Uptown Theater in 1956. They personally greeted each child at the door. When Walt and Roy took to the stage before the movie started, the children sang the Mickey Mouse song to them. Because the Mickey Mouse Club was not broadcast in Marceline at the time, the children learned the song specially for this occasion. Walt then led the excited, admiring group of youngsters in singing the Davy Crockett song. That movie ran from 1:30 in the afternoon until 1:30 the next morning so that everyone who wanted to see the movie could attend. In 1998, the world premiere of The Spirit of Mickey was held in this same theater. Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Pluto, Goofy, and Chip and Dale were in attendance. About 19,000 Disney fans came to Marceline for the event. There has been a bank in this building since 1909 when the Marceline State Bank first opened its doors. Over many decades, the building interior and exterior has been remodeled, and it also included the latest office and security features. In 1930, a new bank front improvements on the House Street sidewall were made. The bank has a long history and has served this area for over 70 years. Across the street is the First National Bank building, another bank here on House Street in Marceline. The building you see here is basically the same as it was when there were brick arches along the front sidewalk. It was said in 1913 that the First National Bank building was housed in a beautiful building and had a great interior that included oak and marble and bronze fixtures. The vault and safe were of the latest design, and every precaution was taken to protect valuables entrusted to the bank's care. All manner of banking was conducted here for local businesses, corporations, city and rural residents. During the Great Depression, many of the banks across the United States closed, and this was one of them. It closed in November of 1931 and never reopened. In the early days of Marceline, when the town was booming and the sound of building construction was constant, local hardware stores were a crucial part of the community, not only for businesses and town residents, but also for the farmers just outside of town. And because of the railroad, the shelves of a hardware store could remain stocked with goods during the busiest of times. Established in 1905, the Central Hardware Company was the first hardware store located here in this building. It was said to be one of the most finely equipped and heavily stocked hardware stores in Marceline. It carried builders' hardware tools, cutlery, stoves, ranges, small implements, and everything else that made for a complete hardware store at the time, including sporting goods. It was also said that Central Hardware purchased stocks in large quantities, and while monitoring market trends, could offer discounts to their customers which could not be equaled anywhere else. Today, the building still continues as a hardware store. Here on this corner by the Allstate store or building, once sat the Cater Opera House. Built and opened in 1902, visiting theater companies performed here for one-week stands with a change of program every night. Around 1910, it converted to a picture show theater and a balcony was added. With the balcony, the theater had a capacity over 600 persons. In addition to movies and live vaudeville acts, the theater was the scene of many athletic and important dances. Walt Disney first saw Peter Pan at the Cater Opera House. A traveling troupe from Stevens College in Columbia, Missouri performed the play for Marceline citizens. This was Walt's first time seeing a live stage performance. The following year, Walt would play the role of Peter Pan in the Parks School play. The Cater Opera House was completely gutted by fire on January 26, 1957. A contemporary news account wrote that it was the worst fire in Marceline history. It also said that the entire city could have burned down if not for the help of the Marceline Fire Department and those from nearby fire departments. We're now coming up to the Zurcher Building. This is a visually stunning building that you can see and is immortalized as the Coke Corner on Main Street, U.S.A. in Disneyland. This fine building was constructed in 1898 and originally served Marceline as a bank on the first floor and a meeting hall on the second floor. Elias Disney, Walt's father, once held an oyster dinner for local apple growers in the meeting hall upstairs. He had hopes to organize the apple growers into a union, but was unable to gather their support. However, this did not keep the growers from eating the oysters. After the first floor bank closed, it became the location of a jewelry store started by W.S. Payne, who had been in business in town since the very beginning of Marceline. His business passed on to Percy Wilkins in 1905, and in 1908, Percy Wilkins took on newly arrived Albert Zurcher as a partner. He sold the business to Mr. Zurcher the following year. Albert Zurcher continued to serve the community for an astonishing 64 more years, selling not only jewelry but also eyeglasses, cameras, TVs, and appliances. This three-story building that you see here is the Magnolia Building, and it was once the IOOF, or International Order of Oddfellows Lodge. This building was dedicated on September 15, 1915. It contained a very large meeting hall upstairs for various fraternal organizations in the Marceline area. Prior to meeting here, those orders met in the old Miners Hall on the corner of Garcia and Kansas Avenue. In the earliest days of the building, a grocery store occupied the downtown areas. An ad for this store in June of 1919 referred to an airplane event at the new Marceline Airport outside of town. The ad said, "See the airplanes, then come to the store for your eats." About that time, local resident Mary Daly became the first woman in Marceline to ride an airplane. There's always something exciting happening in Marceline. This brick building ahead of us is the Marceline Carnegie Library. The effort to secure a Marceline library was started by the Marceline Women's Civic League with a request to the Carnegie Foundation in March of 1917. Just a couple months later, the city of Marceline was notified by the Carnegie Corporation that $12,500 would be granted for a public library. The city had to promise to collect a tax to maintain the library. This building opened to the public on November 1st, 1920. Marceline's earliest history also included coal mining. Coal was needed to fuel the railroad steam locomotives, the power plants, and heat homes. This particular building was once part of the Zurcher Coal Company. The Walt Disney Elementary School was constructed in 1960 as a replacement for the old Park Elementary School. The school opened in this building on August the 29th, 1960. School officials in Marceline had previously asked Walt Disney if he would allow them to use his name for this new school. Walt not only said yes, but also contributed educational materials, artwork, playground equipment, and even a special flagpole to the new school. Walt Disney commissioned one of his artists, Bob Moore, to design artwork for the school's entrance, hallway, and gymnasium. The artwork, featuring dozens of Disney characters, is delightful. Walt Disney had been the chairman of pageantry for the 1960 Winter Olympics, and this flagpole was one of those that flew outside the Olympic venues.